Ancient India, Chapter 4, Lesson 4, The Golden Age of Maurya India. Around 330 BCE, a new ruler came to the throne in a kingdom in northeastern India. Within 35 years, the tiny kingdom grew into the giant Maurya Empire. The first king of the empire was Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta lived in grand style. A Greek traveler described the impressive sight that greeted him at the king's court. The royal palace was supported by great wooden pillars coated with gold. In the park where the palace stood, fountains sprayed the air and fish splashed in ponds. Scores of servants waited on the king. Chandragupta enjoyed luxuries from all parts of Asia. When the king appeared before his subjects, he was often seated in a golden chair carried on his servants' shoulders. Sometimes he rode around on an elephant covered in jewels. Building the Maurya Empire. So we see some pictures here, and it says the people of India were the first to use elephants in warfare. During battles, the huge animals fearlessly charged towards men and horses, causing panic and chaos. India was made up of a number of warring states before Chandragupta came to power. Chandragupta was strong and ruthless as he founded the Maurya Empire. His armies overthrew kingdoms along the Ganges River Valley. Turning west, his armies advanced into the Indus River Valley. A few years later, his power extended over most of north and central India. Like the Egyptian pharaohs, Chandragupta was guided by the basic belief that a ruler must have absolute power or complete control over the people. This idea came from a book of advice called The Science of Material Gain. The book urged kings to control all their subjects and to maintain an army of spies to inform on them. Chandragupta commanded a huge army. Thousands of foot soldiers and mounted troops were ready to maintain law and order and to crush any revolts. The army also had 9,000 war elephants, which struck fear into the hearts of his opponents. Chandragupta had started out his life as a slave. One of his masters educated him. Then he met Alexander the Great, the Greek conqueror of the ancient world. Near the time of this meeting, legend says a lion awakened Chandragupta one night by licking his body. Chandragupta thought that this meant he'd become a great ruler like Alexander. So remember that the lion was the symbol of Babylon or Babylonian Empire. And that's where Alexander's palace was. So we have this idea here that if he was licked by a lion, he should be a king like Alexander. He made his idea a reality. Prosperity and poisoners. Under Chandragupta, the empire enjoyed great success. Most of its wealth came from foreign trade. The Maurya Empire built up a widespread trade with such faraway places as Greece, Rome, and China. However, as his rule continued, Chandragupta became fearful for his life. Thinking poisoners were everywhere, he made his servants taste his food. To avoid being murdered, he slept in a different room every night. One story says he finally became a monk in southern India. Fasting and praying, he starved himself to death. Maintaining the empire. Chandragupta didn't gain wealth for himself only. Though his rule was harsh, he used his wealth to improve his empire. New irrigation systems brought water to farmers, forests were cleared, and more food was produced. Government officials promoted crafts and mining. A vast network of roads made it easier for Maurya traders to exchange goods with foreign lands. Chandragupta's leadership brought order and peace to his people. Ashoka, a father to his people. When Chandragupta died, the empire passed to his son. When his son died, Chandragupta's grandson, Ashoka, gained power. Ashoka, whose name means without sorrow, further expanded Chandragupta's empire. By the end of his rule in 232 BCE, Ashoka had built the greatest empire India had ever seen up to that point. There's a picture there of the great stupa, which was begun by Ashoka, we think. The Battle of Kalinga. For more than 35 years, Ashoka ruled an empire that included that included much of the subcontinent of India. Just the little tip of the southern tip was not ruled by the Mauryans. During the first years of his rule, Ashoka was as warlike as his grandfather, Chandragupta. He conquered new territories to the east. Early in his rule, Ashoka led his army south into the state of Kalinga. He won a bloody battle there in 261 BCE, in which more than 100,000 people were killed. The great slaughter at Kalinga was a turning point in Ashoka's life. He was filled with sorrow over the bloodshed. And remember, his name means without sorrow. He gave up war. He gave up violence. He freed his prisoners and restored their lands to them. Later, he converted or changed his beliefs to Buddhism. Ashoka spreads Buddhist message. Ashoka practiced and preached the teachings of Buddha. He didn't allow the use of animals for sacrifices. He gave up hunting, which had been a traditional sport of Indian kings. Ashoka thought of his people as his children. Like a father, he was concerned with their welfare. He had hospitals built throughout the kingdom. He even had wells dug every mile beside the road so that travelers and animals would not go thirsty. Ashoka was also concerned with the moral and spiritual life of his people. To carry Buddha's message throughout his vast empire, Ashoka issued writings of moral advice. Some writings urged people to honor their parents. Others asked people not to kill animals. Still, others encouraged people to behave with tolerance and truthfulness. Ashoka also issued laws that required people to be treated with humanity. His advice and laws were carved on pillars of stone 30 to 40 feet high throughout the empire. One pillar bore these words: "Both this world and the next are hard to reach except by great love of law, great self-examination, great obedience, great respect, great energy." Ashoka's tolerance for others allowed him to accept Hindus. Many of Buddha's teachings became part of Hinduism during Ashoka's rule. Buddhism grew under Ashoka. He sent missionaries far and wide to spread its message. It was missionaries sent by Ashoka who spread Buddhism to China. Ashoka's sister and brother went to Ceylon, today the country of Sri Lanka, as Buddhist missionaries. He even sent teachers to Egypt and Greece and North Africa. At Ashoka's death, India was united as never before. However, the great Maurya Empire declined after his death. Without his strong rule, his territories were divided. Small states began fighting with one another. Several centuries of invasion and disorder followed. It took almost 600 years before India was united again under the Gupta dynasty. All right, so it is time to take notes.